Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 8th episode of Season 2 of our live chat session by Outdoor Wilderness and Learning, which is OWL for short. Our topic for the day is creating our future today. A recent Microsoft study has shown that while there was universal disruption to COVID, not all persons have been disrupted equally. 61% of the business leaders are doing well for themselves. The report says this means that only 39% of these leaders are surviving or struggling, as opposed to 60% of the Gen Z, 61% of frontline workers, 64% of new employees, which are less than a year old, and a whopping 67% singles who are all struggling. An August HBR article says, and I quote, "The number of people switching jobs has skyrocketed to historical highs in what experts are calling the Great Resignation." So clearly, people are not content with their current state of being. They're in a state of flux. Uncertainty abounds. In this fertile ground, is this the fertile ground for innovation? Is this state of flux the beginning of something wonderful? For all this hardship and loss that COVID has wrought upon us, can we go on to create a more meaningful existence where we not only find happiness, but thrive in what we do? Can we create our own future today? We will discuss all this and more in today's freewheeling chat with Abhijit Pradhan. Abhijit has worked in the corporate world for 16 years, helping launch and resurrect brands. Later, he launched Superstar Business Solutions, which has touched the lives of a multitude of people in a meaningful way through his individual coaching or workshops for organizations, teams designed to create transformation. For over 13 years, he has been working on how to create the right tools and frameworks to help achieve the untapped potential of various companies, leading to the road to success. He has worked with companies such as Godrej Boyce, Marico, Sodexo India, Sony Pictures Network, etc., etc. Abhijit's never-ending surge of curiosity and his rich perspective through researching neuroscience, sports psychology, NLP, quantum physics, positive psychology, etc., has led him to explore the thing that fascinates him the most, the infinite potential that is accessible within each person. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome a dear friend, Abhijit Pradhan, on our OWL chat today. Good morning, or rather good afternoon, Abhijit, and welcome to our show.
Good afternoon, Abhik. Thank you so much. And I think this is quite a moment for me where, for once, I'm being interviewed by you. I remember interviewing you once for a project, and a big hello to the OWL team for making this happen. And of course, the audience.
Thank you once again, Abhijit. Abhijit, from being a successful ad man, if I can call you that, which is when I first met you many, many years ago, to being a sought after superstar coach for individuals and organizations, it's been quite a journey for you. And during your days in advertising, did you ever visualize yourself in the role that you're in today?
The honest answer is no. Okay. But, I'd like to borrow from the famous 2005 Stanford speech, the commencement speech from Steve Jobs, right? Give yourself to your passions as they come, and ultimately have faith that the dots will connect. And honestly, that's been my journey. So everything that I have done has always been passion first. So incidentally, when we first met was not when I was in advertising. I was actually in Sony Music. So it was music, my number one passion. So I've been in music, I've been in Foster's, launched the beer brand way back in 98. And at that time, it was a passion. I don't drink anymore, but in any case, but every single stint in my life has been passion. But today, when I look at it, and you talked about a couple of companies, different industries, when I try and help them see what they, let's say, don't easily see, it's this, let's say, journey of experiences which allow me to kind of, add that perspective and maybe add value in a way I would probably not have done if my path was far more linear. So I think in hindsight, as all great learning happens, it has really been very, very fruitful and effective for me, at least.
For you to join. Absolutely. But your subjects are so varied: neuroscience, sports psychology, NLP, quantum physics, positive psychology. Now, not all of them naturally kind of weave themselves into each other. All right. So why did you pursue such diverse subjects, given that these were not part of your initial training or degree?
Okay, so anecdotally, my last stint, like you said, in the corporate world, and I've been lucky that most of my assignments in my corporate career have always been challenges, and I've also had these learnings, insights, etc. So one of the insights that I had in a corporate company where there was a lot of disruption, the industry was disrupted. It was way back in 2006 and 2007, when the company's survival was literally at stake. One of the things I realized was, okay, you're part of a team and you're tasked with a mission. Okay. But unfortunately, what happens in corporate structures is that, you take two steps forward and 4 steps back, because, in a corporate team, besides the common goal, if there is one, there are a lot of question marks on agenda and things like that. And that unfortunately comes in the way of the company for going forward. And that used to bother me. And I used to think, okay, hang on. Is there a better way? Is there a far more effective way to help change happen? And that's where I felt that rather than me being part of the core team, can I be an external, an outsider who could come in with the garb of, let's call it, neutrality, and establish that and help people actually reach a direction which otherwise they would have had challenges in reaching. And that was my epiphany. I also honed into coaching specifically because I used to, as a business leader, I used to believe that my teams would go for training programs, and I'm not trying to diss training programs, but it's how you kind of design training programs. And they would get excited and and then come back, and then life would go back to square one. So my question used to be, okay, hang on, how did it all ultimately culminate in something which was a fruitful or a tangible outcome for both individual as well as organization? And that's the reason why I felt at that time that maybe being a coach who works on individuals, okay, because it's not about one homogeneous set of people and all rules apply to all. Maybe I could work on the leaders, and have that individual connect, and therefore it being a far more customized journey, it could maybe create far more impact. Because if the leader is going through that, then that leader could obviously kind of take that forward, to the rest of the organization. So that was the thinking. And coaching, this was way back 2007. Trust me, I mean, I had zero knowledge. There was nothing about coaching anyway, and these are not, I mean, even Google was probably young in those days, right? So it wasn't easy, but somewhere you kind of say, okay, I want to learn this, found a program in Singapore, got myself trained and certified, found one program over here later, did that also. So, it just, I think that conviction, belief that this could help me. I don't know the details of how, but that faith that.
But you were willing to learn.
Yeah, that there's potential value in it, and then you commit to that, and then, there is, since you're also in the space of the wanderers and travel, there is that quote from that famous explorer, right? Munro, Scottish explorer, where, every journey needs to, you need that first step. You need to begin. You can't just visualize it mentally. You have to take that first step of courage. That is the true journey of intention. So I always believe that it's very important to commit. Then what happens, and then that's really been my experience in all these. You call them diverse, but incidentally, I actually find them different sides of the same coin.
Kind of homogeneous? The structures?
Yeah, because,
interwoven?
Because, one of the things that I've realized after working with multiple industries is that there is far more similarity, connections than we see. Because, when we are in a industry, we operate with a silo. I am an expert at. And, we get into this mode of expertise because expertise is valued, expertise is paid for, your career path is driven by expertise. But what happens is that we're also humans. And humans don't have these silos, right? the way I connect with my mobile, the way I connect with art, the way I connect with entertainment. To me, it's a superfluous experience, right? So it's important. I realize that you need to come at it with different angles, because you may get a perspective which you missed in the traditional or the conventional path that you would have taken to address that issue. So whether that issue can be solved by behavioral design, whether that issue can be solved with art therapy, whether that issue can be solved with AI, augmented reality, whatever, it doesn't matter. See, these are all tools and means, but ultimately there are different, let's call it this way, different buttons which work for different people. And that's, I think, very important. So I think that was a learning from my coaching, let's say, immersion, that, different strokes for different folks. So if I don't have an immersion in the different strokes, I might totally lose, a potential connect. And I think that for me was very, very important.
So different strokes for different folks. And so that's pretty much what you would have done even in your coaching assignments, depending on the organization. So one thing that you did say earlier was working towards a goal. And you did mention that provide if they have a common goal. So I saw perhaps an underline of the word if in your statement as well.
It's a very big if. So again, going back to the structure of silos, our organizations traditionally are structured for efficiency. The finance department is supposed to be the best in finance, the marketing in marketing, sales in sales. So what happens is that while they're doing the very best that they're supposed to, where does it all come together? Where does it all come together to fall in place for, let's say, the larger organization goal? And does that have to be mandated, or does that have to be assumed? And that's where I find a lot of gap. And it's not easy for an organization. And, you talk about disruption, you talked about COVID, but change has been happening for millennia.
True.
But I think our ability to recognize change, that it's happening, and adapt to it, and then third, make the most of it, is probably our biggest weakness. So, and I think, like Charles Darwin spoke about, it's essentially adapting, right? Adapting is what has made our species thrive, maybe at the expense of the planet, but we'll come to that later. But the point is, it's that ability, right? And it's important, therefore, that we get out of the normal and somehow try and align towards, let's say, a common goal, and see, if you look at it, it's not new. When there is, let's say, an India cricket match with, the favorite opponent country, everybody's aligned. Nobody, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. You're getting the point. And It's just one goal, right? Whether it is that, whether it was COVID, whether it is, multiple things. What happens is that there are moments when people leave aside the silo and the baggage and all of that and say, okay, right now let's focus on that. And I think we need a lot more of that as individuals, a lot more of that as teams, a lot more of that as organizations, because somewhere down the line, we lose that bit and we lose the potential impact that we could have had, if we were aligned. This is a favorite segue for me, which is, this is way back, JFK, John F. Kennedy. I think he engaged and he kind of ignited probably one of the best moments of an entire country coming together. If you remember, this was the space race, which the Russians were, the Soviets at that time were leading, and which really, really made America uncomfortable, right? And what did he do? He got into inspiration, saying mankind is all about progress. He contextualized it, and more importantly, he delivered that moonshot goal. The word moonshot comes from that speech in the 60s, right? Where he declared that within this decade, within 7 years or whatever, we are not just going to go into space and do one more thing incrementally better than what the Russians are doing. We're going to put a man on the moon.
True.
And at that time, the technology did not exist to put the man on the moon. So because of that, it galvanized the nation and say, hey, this is a lofty goal. And he said it. He said, this is not going to be easy. And we're not taking this goal because it's easy, but it's worthy. It's a worthy goal. And it's not just about America versus, it's about mankind. So it's like it took on the mantle of doing it for mankind, right? So whichever way you look at it, whatever the intentions were and the strategy behind it, but the point is that it made a massive impact. It in fact inspired countries besides the US. I've heard of, I believe there were crowds in Bombay in the 60s cheering, when the actual landing happened. So it's that, how do you create moonshots? But this is really about, first and foremost, seeing the future together on a common platform.
So we'll come to that, Abhijit. But before that, our viewers, please feel free to post your questions in the YouTube chat, because at the end of, towards the end of this talk, Abhijit will be happy to take some of these questions as well. So you did talk about the future. So I just wanted to ask you this. You are a futurist coach, all right? What does that mean? What is a futurist coach? So I believe it's not someone who predicts the future, of course, but someone who prepares somebody for the future. And how do you do that?
Okay, so first and foremost, labels are labels and people get excited by labels, but I think it's just got different connotations and connect. So for example, somebody might say I'm a life coach, somebody might say I'm an executive coach because I work with leaders, etc. in organizations. But honestly, it doesn't matter, because a coach in a game like sports is a sports coach. But what are you doing? You're helping someone realize true potential and act and work towards it. So if you were to take that as the base principle, that would just have different contexts. Okay. A lot of our context is about, do I incrementally, operate, or am I ready, and can I have, that discontinuous growth? And that's where the future part comes in. So when you talk about a new business model, 30 years back, nobody changed business models just like that. Today, you're probably doing it every year, because the rate of change has changed. Change hasn't changed. It's the rate, velocity, quantum, all of that has changed. Technology, and of course, certain events. And we've had let's call it a black swan event, which is obviously COVID. Sure. But I believe the climate challenge probably is going to be the real wake-up call for us, because it's happening and we are not seeing it. And incidentally, the pandemic was the same thing, because for 20 years, the signs were there. Okay. And we've gone through those things, but we had, let's call it, limited responses to that. And when it hit us, somewhere down the line, it's also as if like, oh my God, how could this happen? The writing was on the wall since 2003.
So Abhijit, that's for an event. The writing was on the wall. It's been happening for 20 years, etc. Does it also happen in the life of any human being, that the signs are there for you to change, for you to Absolutely. Kind of reinvent yourself, or for you to know that things are going to change drastically in the future, even to oneself? So when you went from working in Foster's and working with the ad industry for a while, then moving on to being a coach. So do you feel, looking back at your journey, that you too did apply some of the learnings and reinvent yourself, though at that time you perhaps may not have used the word that I'm creating my future? It may have been something else that you said. But how do you kind of look back at that versus the thought that now it's structured, that you are creating things for the future, you're preparing people for the future now?
Okay, I think there were a couple of questions there. So let me go back to the first one, which is, I think the signs are always there, whether for an individual, whether for an organization, or for a team or a country, whatever. Okay. Now it's a question of formally, recognizing that these are signals. And you asked me, what does a futurist coach do? It comes from a practice called futures thinking. Okay, specifically futures, because it's about the potential futures that one could have. Okay, and like you rightly said, it's not about crystal ball gazing, it's not about prediction, but it's about understanding possibility. And let's say I actually start from that possibility. What could the future of human and technology working together be in the future? All right. And I look and gaze into that, keeping in mind current signals. There are already signals happening of how chatbots, along with humans, how they kind of interact together when a chatbot is on its own, when a human comes in to kind of, intervene. So there's already this partnership between technology and humans happening. It's a signal. It's not mainstream yet, but it's a signal. Now I can say, okay, if I were to see that as the future, what all should I then be doing if I want to play a dominant role in that future? So the future is about choices. It's about what future do I want. It's not about what future is going to happen. So this is really about an empowering journey. So Alan Kay, he's one of the Silicon Valley kind of bigwigs, pre-Steve Jobs and all of that. And he said something very, and in fact, it probably is attributed to multiple people, but he's remembered for this, which is the easiest way to predict the future is to invent it. And that is what man is about. We are not, by nature, a spectator species. We can be. We end up when we are not, let's say, living to our true potential. But in our true potential, we are a species who creates, or at least co-creates, our future, our path, our destiny, everything. And that's what we've been doing for millennia. So I think it's just a power of realizing that, and futures, like you call it futuristic coach or futures coaching or whatever it is really about helping either individuals, teams, or organizations create a framework, practice, and a hard-nosed business approach, let's call it that, to anticipating the future with signals of today and having a game plan, which they start moving towards right now. Because the future is, as Vijay Govindarajan is another, esteemed professor from the US, and he says, the future is now. You can't act on the future in the future. If you're not acting on the future now, literally you're missing the boat. So, but for that to happen, okay, you need to so there are two challenges, and that's where a futuristic coach, if I may call it that, what the role he plays, which is two things. There's a tension point in organizations, I'm sure you'll realize, across, which is, while I create the future, of tomorrow today, what do I do of my current reality? Okay, because as all organizations have this beautiful description of current reality, they call it QSQT, quarter se quarter tak, right? So that's the reality. Now the point is that I can't escape that. I'm going to get questioned and hauled up every week. Forget about quarter, right? And that's a business reality. So the real challenge, and that's where coaching is needed. That's where intervention is needed, because structurally organizations are not designed to handle this tension of how do I optimize the present while creating the future today. So if I were to define that as the goalpost, that's really where a futures coach would play a role.
That's a domain where a future coach kind of thrives. So you did talk about, Abhijit, that you said the future is about choices, the future is now. What about the current reality? These are all valid points, but you also talked about that to do all this, you need to create a framework or a kind of a game plan. So is there any kind of an established tenet to create one's own successful future? So how do we go about it? One is that is it a very individual-led thing? An individual does it in a certain way, or is there a formula, or maybe formula is too strong a word, But are there some kind of maxims or tenets that I remember we did speak about it, and something that shows a roadmap to people like a business leader or anyone who wants to embark on such a journey, that, okay, if you do a few things right, you will be able to get into a co-creation of your future?
Okay. No, so there is definitely a framework and an ever-evolving framework, if I may call it that, okay, which one can apply. But just remember one simple thing. There are two environments to manage for any future, individual, team, or organization. Okay, these are the internal environment, which means your own journey, your own volition, your passions, your motivations, etc. And second, the external environment, which is what's going on, what are the trends, what are the challenges going on, etc., etc. So you can't have these two operate obviously in isolation, right? Because they have to kind of mesh for it to truly kind of work. So you need to therefore know yourself. That's number one. So starting point always, because it's not that everybody wants to be that person who sends rockets to space, right? Not everybody is a Elon Musk or a Bezos or a Branson or whatever. You may not have that intention, passion, whatever, right? So you need to first realize where you're coming from. So that's very important. So, and this has got nothing to do with the future. It is to do with any organization, to really know who we are and more importantly, articulate it. Because, a lot of this is assumed. And, as leadership regimes change and all of that, that culture or whatever you want to call it can then kind of wither away and you can lose the crux of who you are. So that's number one. Okay. The number two is, like I said, the external and how do you read that and how do you kind of convert it into a playbook. So I would say there needs to be a toolkit. Okay. And that toolkit would need a couple of things which operate from first principles. Okay. So you use the word.
Is it a very complicated toolkit?
No,
is it?
No, it's just simple things to remember. Yeah. So, for example, I think if you could just talk about number one, yeah, and maybe we can flash that for everyone's reference.
Okay.
So, like I was saying earlier, like the moonshot, right? We will land, a man on the moon. Okay. You need to see the future to create it. Otherwise, it's not just about, okay, hey, let's go create the future. That's not the point. But how do you visualize it? What is the future that matters to you? What is the future that will matter to more than you? And that's important. And that's where that collective bit, that alignment we spoke about, all of that. So as a team, if it was a team, what does the team see as the future together? Or an organization? So it's important to see the future. And if you look at this as, let's say, a principle, seeing is not as obvious as seeing. Okay, seeing needs perspective. Okay, I'm going to request you to play this video because this is my favorite video, which kind of demonstrates this point. Can we have that video?
An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression. But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on.
Thank you. So, this is like one of my all-time favorite clips. It's a 30-year-old TVC of The Guardian. And I don't know if everybody managed to see that properly, but
yes.
Essentially, as you can see in the clip, there's a scene where there is a man, a good-for-nothing looking kind of man, and people are looking at him like, very suspiciously. And then second scene, oh my God, this guy is going to rob that poor old man, right, with that briefcase or whatever, office briefcase. And third, oh, wow, this guy is saving this poor man, which otherwise, would have kind of been killed probably with that collapsing roof. Now, do you realize in 30 seconds, your perception has drastically changed from scene one to scene two to to scene 3. And once you've seen scene 3, you can't literally go back to scene 1. So, we live life like this. We have our, let's call it, limited point of view. Okay. And unfortunately, then that becomes our silo. That becomes our future. So if we just see the future in terms of possibility from only one perspective, okay, you might be missing something hugely valuable. So I think number one part of the toolkit is to pull back, get other voices. And you may not, you're not, you can't suddenly, you're not a drone, right? You can't suddenly pull back and look 100 feet up in the sky and see what's going on. So the easiest way to do this, and I use this as part of my process in the coaching, which is you may not see your blind spots. I'll explain the blind spot later, but others can. So ask others, as a process. So, I know Abhik, but hey, maybe others will know Abhik in a way Abhik doesn't. So can I at least get those points? Okay. And the same thing with a business. Can you get multiple perspectives, diverse perspectives, because a marketing guy will only think marketing, but hang on, maybe the R&D guy will have a very different way of looking at it. Maybe a salesperson will have a very different way of looking at it. So can I get these diverse perspectives, which by the way, always exist? It's just a question of, do we harness them? Because, there is this unfortunate, birds of a feather flock together syndrome. And we're very comfortable with people like us, right? And that comes in the way of true creativity, because as you can see, I'm sure you'll see across the board, true creativity happens when you have multiple and diverse, points of views, which can get meshed together, and boom, you have something massive. So otherwise, it's like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs' legacy was not about technology. He married humanities, art, and technology. He did a course in, if you remember, fonts and
fonts, correct.
Because and people say, why? But all that, those dots connecting later was just about how I can make, it a beautiful experience, not just an efficient experience. How do I get aesthetics into an experience which was not even seen as part of a technology experience earlier? So I'm just saying that those are multiple perspectives. So it's important that one pulls back, and therefore sees the future what it actually could be. So that's number one, as a maxim. Okay, because if you have the right starting point, okay, you can then as they say, a good journey needs to be a well-begun journey, right? So that's a very important point. The other part is, I think I mentioned it fleetingly earlier, which is irrational optimism versus rational optimism. Now you can say, hey, and I'm not going to quote who said that, this virus is just going to go away. Right? We've heard that. It's not going to happen. We've seen it. It's a part of life. So this actually comes, from the playbook of the Greek Stoic philosophers, right? And there was someone called Epictetus. And a simple lesson from here was, you should have two files open in your brain all the time. Okay. File number one is this something that I can change or control? Do I have any influence on it? Okay. And second is this something that I can control or influence? So if you look at any event, anything with those filters, and even the change, the future, this is COVID. Okay. What can I change? What can I not? And being clear and accepting of what you can't gives you a lot of peace. Otherwise, what happens is that when you mix it all together, you get paralyzed. And a lot of people have, unfortunately. So, what's going to happen? My job, my this, my health, a lot of things, unfortunately, get clubbed and then become ambiguous. This is, you mentioned neuroscience as one of the passion points, but I don't know if you know this, but do you know that our brain, our subconscious brain, loves goals, more importantly, loves constraints.
Challenges.
Constraints.
Okay,
I'll give you an example. So you tell two athletes, athlete one, go ahead and run as fast as you can, right? You tell athlete number 2, you have to run within X. This is the pace you have to run, or whatever it is. You give him rules. Okay. Think who's actually going to perform.
The one with the constraints that you have to do it within a particular.
Yeah. So when the subconscious brain loves specificity, it loves structure. Why do we love our games, our sports so much? Cricket is played within constraints, right? It's not about a guy who can just do whatever the hell he wants with the ball or a bat. You play within that over. You play within the rules of that over. You play within the rules of that game. And in that, excel. So we as a race have always thrived within constraints. But when we see those constraints as part of a game, when we see those, like it's like a race, it's like a run, it's like game, it's like whatever. So I have to deliver X shareholder return before something, right? And that's what gets the best out of so many leaders.
Correct.
Challenges. But as opposed to, hey, go do what you want. Trust me, that's not going to work.
Sure. So it has to be finite, well-defined.
Tangible, yes.
Tangible.
Yeah. And at the
measurable.
Time, yeah. And this is important because then it's real. When I look at the future, it's not some, hey, we're all going to be a nice, happy family. Imagine, sorry, John Lennon, I love you, but, imagine where the world is together. It's not going to happen until and unless you actually have reality and then ways to counter that reality and steps that you take to make that reality happen. So it's very important to start here. Okay. So that's really maxim number 1.
Okay. So in this entire thing, when you're saying that the structure has the first maxim talks about seeing the future. So it's something that you kind of visualize. So how do you lead on to the next one?
So if you just flash that. So we spoke about this already, it's not about the future happening to you. It's about what you can make happen. Okay. And future thinking or futures thinking is really about forecasting and figuring out the forecast, which you can then test out. Okay. And then you test, iterate, reiterate as you go along. But because it gives you a far more finite, tangible, structured way of approaching the future, as opposed to, hey, something which is, wishful thinking. It's a vision board for some people. One day, that, what do you call it? The Bugatti is going to be mine. So it's nice, but it's not going to get you there. So it's important that one takes all these tools and applies it, and rather than react to the future, proact, towards the future that you want to make. Yeah.
So the first one is see it. The second one is create it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
you want to go to the third one?
Yeah. Where?
So this is an important point. It takes into account perspective, how do you really see the future, etc. And it is the antithesis to incrementalism. Okay, what does that mean? When organizations normally look at the future, it's about, okay, this is what we're doing right now. What should we be doing tomorrow? It's present forward. Now, across the board, this is pointed out as one of the biggest, let's call it, impediments to truly making the future happen. When I don't have the baggage of the present, and then I envisage the future, and then I work backwards, okay, it can probably become a far more innovative, discontinuous solution. So it's like this. I am a taxi guy, and what could I do to innovate? I could add more thrills and frills in my taxi. I'll add more lights and disco, better upholstery. Or I pull back and say, hang on, there seems to be a very broken consumer experience in getting cabs. Can I stitch it? Can I make it far more seamless? Can I make it less of a heartburn? Can I get people to connect with a cab when they actually need one and not, be at the mercy? So it's not coming from the present. It's coming from what could be. It's future back. And then I say, if I visualize a future in which X, whatever, what all will it take to get there? Then I start, putting the pieces together, and one by one, it starts becoming reality. Like LinkedIn, which now everybody uses, it started with just putting up a profile. That's it. So they read, Hoffman talks about it. That we went from one transaction. Our future was about, executing it transaction by transaction. So first there was profile, then there were far more profiles, then, interactions. So it kept getting iterated towards whatever, But the point I'm trying to make is that, so the future doesn't happen automatically or instantly either. But if you have a visualization of what it could be ideally, it gives you a better game plan of what steps ideally you should take. And they, of course, from an agile perspective, some may work, some may not. So you learn, you change that, but you have a game plan. I want to get my man on the moon. So do I do it like this? Do I do that? You're getting my point. So I have a broad vision, but if I didn't have that, the Russians put the first man in space. So I could have said, I'm going to put 2 men in space. Now that could have been present forward. Putting a man physically on the moon, I thought, that's true into the future and then working backwards. What are the technologies we need? What is it that we need to reinvent as an organization, culture, etc. So that's really, so organizations, unfortunately, they do now, then the planning is next and then future. So that paradigm has to change to now, future, and then next. Think about the difference. Because my QSQT is operating from now to next. It does not incorporate the future. Because that same fallacy of, the future will happen. And then suddenly, oh my God, the consumers are so ahead of us, marketers telling me, right? And this is 5 years back. They know technology far better than us. They're more connected. Now they're more empowered. But it was already happening. If you didn't realize that and see the signals right from then, and then work backwards, and rather than react to consumers the way they are, and actually create models, which obviously the tech companies did that because that was, they didn't have that baggage of the present.
True.
Yeah. So that's maxim number 3. There are only 5, so don't worry, guys.
So the first is see, create, and then lead from the future backwards. Let's have the 4th one.
So there is another part of understanding how to see the future. And, people say, hey, who cares about the past? So it's like, at one level, there is this maxim, which is here and now. That's all that matters. But hang on. There are, 3 tenses, past, present, and future for a reason. So it's important that we learn from the past, because there are a lot of lessons, mistakes that could help us, as opposed to, hey, let's just take a shot at it. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, this is a quote which really resonated with me by Rebecca Solnit. Yeah. What she said is, we adjust to changes without measuring them. We forget how much has changed. Okay. So essentially, we are very immune to change. We don't realize the change that has already happened. We talk about, oh my God, COVID, oh my God, digital transformation, digital disruption. We've been changing. We can go back to 7, when when India opened up economically, etc. A lot of changes happened then. The way businesses, functioned, the way the consumer life was, etc., etc. When when the mobile came in, I'm not talking about smartphones, and suddenly people could connect with people in totally different ways. Then, of course, the smartphone and the geo revolution, if you want to call it that, all of those. So if there have been these inflection points throughout our lives. But the point is, we take them for granted. So it's important that you look back and see those inflection points, see the learnings from them. Some could be valuable, some may not, but it's important. So any organization, right, if they look back and see, yes, this is what we did right, this is our learning, and we should probably never do this again, it will help the paving the path, for the future. So that to me is a very important thing to remember. Otherwise, it's like, ditch the past, who cares, let's just create the future, but you may have missed something. And see, it's like this, as an individual, if I were to kind of drill down to a person, I might realize that in school, I was very good at X, and people used to acknowledge that. I used to love it. I don't know. I mean, like some people would say, oh, I used to sing, maybe. I'm not talking about me. My only tryst with the music industry was playing the music and not singing it. So maybe you realize that there were these moments, those untapped, moments of potential or whatever. And that is looking in the past and saying, oh, hang on, this is something that I haven't really, unleashed or unlocked. And that might give you insight, saying that when I approach the future, I can do it in a way that is actually reflective of who I am. Yeah. In a way that I would never have done otherwise if I had done that little bit of introspection. Yeah. Or retrospection. So it's important to have that perspective as well. Yeah. As the next maxim.
Okay. So
we can next one or the last one.
Okay.
So it's not about wishful thinking. Yeah. So, there is a very old anonymous Japanese proverb. So it's very easy to use it, right? You don't know who said it. But it goes like this. Vision without action is daydreaming. Okay? But action without vision is a nightmare. You need the two. You need the yin and yang of the two, because either of those two don't work on their own. And unfortunately, I find people are in the either or boat. Either you're just thinking, visualizing and all of that, and nothing happens and all of that, versus, oh my God, I'm doing, and there's so much I'm doing, but hey, where am I heading?
Fantastic. So
it's important to visualize the future and at the same time have the action plan linked to that visualization. Otherwise, these two, unfortunately, and in organizations, it always happens.
Otherwise, it just remains on the blackboard or on your whatever, your diary or something.
So it's not a true aligned, inspiring moonshot. Okay. And it's not drilled down to what does it mean to get there. So the action plan has to be umbilically cord linked to that moonshot.
So Abhijit, sorry, yeah.
No. So essentially, to finish that, I'm saying that if I have to put a man on the moon, I have to do X. These industries need to get funded. These new competencies need to get created. So I need to have that clear, action list. So that is futures thinking, if you were to ask me.
So now these are all kind of 5 maxims, as you put it. These are 5 maxims or tenets for people to follow, but it's still not very easy. A lot of people probably know this in different ways. It's probably there in different books they've read, etc. But they really need help in getting it done. And you can see that people are really crying for that I want to get it done. So do you have a kind of a workshop around creating one's own future around these 5 maxims? because there are individuals who want to chart out their own careers, businesses, paths, and they need coaching and or guidance. And these 5 maxims, what we have seen, they are a very powerful tool to propel them to exciting possibilities.
So to answer your question, I've actually been using this broad approach right from the beginning of Superstar. Okay. So they've all been tried, tested, learned from, applied in real-time cases, etc. For both individuals, teams, as well as organizations. So in fact, about 7 years back, I embarked, 8 years back, or 9 years back, wow. I embarked on a book writing journey, which then ultimately became a workshop journey, because I found the workshops did far more, and I kind of didn't see how the book would have actually had that impact. Besides promoting me, and that wasn't the intention of the book, but essentially it was something called a Superstar Code workshop. The Superstar Code, if you remember, you said unlocking the true potential in every one of us. So for me, the name Superstar, the company's name, comes from that, the superstar within us. And the Superstar Code was really about unlocking that superstar within you. And it was taking into account 3 questions. What makes you tick? So which is about knowing you. What makes you, or what will help you click? And this is about the internal and the external. So what are your goals? What are the challenges that you face, the barriers, etc.? How would you use the best of who you are to address the future? And the third part is, how do you make it stick? So it's about sustainability. So I, in fact, had a workshop which used to, and I did about 20 of them. Literally
so part of the same organization, or any individual could have joined that workshop of yours?
So both. So I, in fact, tested this concept out with individuals who used to come to my place. So there were families and things like that. And the reason why I, in fact, pivoted to organizational teams after that was I had an insight. The first workshop itself, there was a family. So there were like 7-8 people. And one of, the participants, they were a family of mother, father, and a 12-year-old. Yeah. And after the workshop, the mother who had got me in said, I have never, and this is like, we were married for 20 years, but I never realized all these dimensions about my husband. And I was like, whoa.
Interesting.
So, yeah. And so
in a good way, she said that.
Yeah, in a good way.
Oh, okay.
They're still married. Anyway, the point is that I said, if this is happening in such a close-knit unit, like a family, can we imagine what's going on in organizational teams?
Organizations, you're right.
And where, there's conflict and, friction and all that. And it was true. So I took that into teams. I added more tools to it, etc. But essentially, that first process of empathy, knowing why you do what you do, not because you are targeting me, but because this is who you are and this is how you behave, was such a relaxer for most teams. And they realize that there are different ways people operate and have different codes. And that was the whole idea of Superstar Code, that it first kind of, aligned them towards, hey, this is why and this is how we are different. And then the third part, using that difference to a common goal. So if I have to get the moon shot, right? How do I use the best of A, B, C, D? Because each one of us come from a very different view. I'll give you a quick example. Okay, let's say stereotypes. Mm-hmm. So there was a participant who was an engineer, who was a robotic software engineer. Okay. So now, when you think robotic software engineer, you think analytics and all of that. When he went through the workshop, he realized that his driving factors were creativity, people, imagination. Okay? All right. Now, and it was a massive epiphany for him, because he realized that his journey in robotics was not about going into a factory and creating scaled up automation and all of that. But in fact, and that's what he did. He wanted to help children learn better using robots, because he realized that that was his filter. And everybody has a filter. And that filter is not your weakness. It's who you are. So how do you apply that filter in an organizational context for a common goal is essentially what that workshop was. So to answer your question, yes, It's happened at individuals, it's happened at team levels, and it's also happened for organizations. When, let's say, for example, they want to do a visioning for an organization, or a next business model, or a value proposition, or whatever it is. So, but the principles are the same. The principles are the same. First, how do you see reality? How do you have a shared agreement, acknowledgement, acceptance of that reality? And going from there, what is that vision or the future that you all therefore want to create together? So it's pretty much this. And you have to follow the process. You have to follow the rigor, because for them to get it, they have to. So it's not about me just giving you a framework. So actually what I do is, let's say in any organization, I would interview them individually. I would interview their various stakeholders individually across the ecosystem. So then when they see that reality, firstly, they say, oh, you get us now. You're not just preaching. You get us. You get what we're going through. And now you've articulated for all of us to accept. So it creates one level of, let's call it empathic, agreement or whatever. And basis that, saying, yes, that's our passion. Those are our ambitions. And therefore, that's the future. So the future is not just one lofty kind of ambition that one day we will be X and all of that, but it comes ground up. And I think that's very important in any journey, individual, team, or organization-wise, that it has to be first principle driven. It has to be ground up. And that action and vision, if you remember,
action vision.
Yes. Very, very critical that they are umbilically cord connected. Otherwise, it will fall apart. You're right. Absolutely. It's not an easy journey, but are there tools? There are lots of tools. Are there people? I'm sure there are, and for me, 13 years has essentially been about, helping people do what otherwise they would not have done for themselves or their teams or their organization.
Okay. So, Abhijit, as you know, OWL is a learning and development platform also, and we have been conducting workshops for corporates. So I think we both need to talk, and we need to figure out 1 day, 2 day kind of workshops for a lot of our clients who might benefit from the huge exciting possibilities that this kind of a futures workshop, where futures thinking is involved, where they can really go and create their own future in a very structured fashion. So I don't know whether it's a 1 day workshop or a 2 day workshop, but I think I'm pretty excited the prospect of doing something together with you. So I'll leave it at that right now. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the formal round, but here's where, Abhijit, we take a few questions from our audience, and I can, the viewers, I can see a few questions coming in. So I'll take the first one, which is, why is there a sudden need to see the future of work, the future of workplace, etc., when earlier it was mostly live in the present? It was all about, the here and now. Suddenly everyone's talking about the futures thing. Why is it that important?
So it's not actually now. It's always been important. It's all about relevance, right? It's the organizations, the individuals, the teams who stay relevant. And the journey of relevance is what forces you to kind of up the ante on acting on the future. It happened probably at a pace which was far slower earlier. It's happening at a far more frenetic pace now. So why now?
The last 18 months.
It's purely not 18 months. It's the digital disruption that has actually changed industries. It's been happening for the last 5 years. So in fact, in India, one of the inflection points, as we fondly call it, is the geo effect, right? In America, for example, there is a GAFA effect, which is Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, right? When these outlier companies, which then become massive,
mainstream,
when they influence everything else, if you don't change, you will be extinct. It's as simple as that. So there's a survival reason, and then there is a ambition reason, saying that, do I want to just be part of the herd, or do I want to kind of do something which is ahead of the curve? So I think these are the two motivations that probably are reason. And the reason for now, like I said, it's purely the pace.
So we have another question from Calcutta coming in, which is, considering that you have been an NLP practitioner and very well read on quantum physics, what is your advice, or what kind of role does spirituality play in one's career? So I think, though we didn't discuss spirituality, it's probably your background, people would have seen some of your talks or probably seen your bio, and that's where this question would have come from.
So firstly, let me answer that by, again, repeating what I said earlier, different labels for different folks, right? What is spirituality? Spirituality is really about understanding oneself, or having a process of understanding oneself and acting on it. So it's the same thing like we just spoke about right now. Okay. So anything that helps you get there and helps you unlock what ideally you would like to unlock is, to my mind, any of these practices. You talked about NLP. What is NLP? Neuro-Linguistic Programming, not what the techies talk about, but this is essentially the way our subconscious mind actually operates. So by the way, I don't know if you know this, but the language that it stores information, our subconscious brain, is not words, etc. It's the five senses. Visual, it's the five senses, right? Visual, hearing, feeling, touch, all of that. That's how it encodes and stores information. So when we see a movie, why do we get so moved by it? Why do we get so affected by those things? Because it is connecting with that language, the emotion, that language center, not the outside language center that we're used to. So when a speech, makes an impact on you, it's connecting with your subconscious brain. So NLP essentially is a way to hack the system using this thing. So essentially, all these things lead to Rome. Everything leads to Rome, which is, I think, unrealized potential. Whether it is design thinking in an organizational context. Okay, what is design thinking? It's about empathy, observation, and using that rather than just going and asking someone, hey, what kind of life would you like to have? You may not know, but if you observe the challenges and the pain points that the person is going through, you can then deduct that, hey, maybe this Uber kind of taxi service could make a massive difference to this person's life. Because he's not going to tell you, oh, you know what, ideally, I would like an app which aggregates it all. We don't know. Steve Jobs' famous comment was, consumers never know. Consumers know when they are shown what it is. Then they have a point of view. But if you just tell them, what could be the future of X? You don't have a clue because you don't have a benchmark. So today, when I see an Amazon kind of service, people are comparing the Amazon service to other companies, other industries, and the other guys are saying, but how can you compare us? Point is, one consumer, it's all connected, it's all fluid. Why not? Right? So that's, I don't know if I answered the question. So quantum physics is the same thing. It's about potential, again, at a subatomic
level. Okay, here's one more. Everyone understands that change is unavoidable, but why only 1% are able to foresee the future and bring about that change? How can we train our brains to be visionaries?
So, if you break it down, so you're right, 1% is correct. And as you know, the world, 1% is where the wealth is, right? For some reason. Is change learnable? Is the future attainable by all? Definitely. It's really about those maxims we spoke about. So, for example, practicing empathy. Now, you'll say, oh, practicing empathy sounds very nice, but I'll give you an example, hard-nosed example from an industry perspective. This is about a couple of years back. Ford Automotive, this is the US. They had automobile engineers, okay, where something called an empathy belly. Okay, so essentially they're going into the shop floor and they were wearing a pregnant belly, a simulated, let's call it an apron, which kind of simulated as if they were pregnant. Why? Because they wanted the engineers to realize what happens when a pregnant woman actually gets into one of the trucks. Are you getting the point?
Yeah.
So you need to create hacks for yourself. You need to have actions which get you closer and closer to how do I get better perspective? How do I kind of get insights which I otherwise would not have got? That's important. How do I, it's about practice, So for example, you say, okay, it's easy to say, control what you can and leave what you can't. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to start somewhere. So I've been running and all of that. The first step is about showing up for the race.
Yes.
So my answer to anyone who wants to change is show up. Take the first step. Remember that Monroe's example. Take that first step. Then let the next step follow. But the point is, if you don't take it, then you're a spectator. If you want to be a creator, take the first step. And it's about step by step. How much time do we have?
Well, that's okay. So we are almost 1 hour into the talk right now.
No. Should I give an example of this?
Yeah. Please do.
Okay. So there is a basic, it's a beautiful hack which has helped a lot of people in those superstar code workshops. It's a practice called tiny habits.
Okay. Tiny habits.
Tiny habit. Okay. So it's like saying, hey, you know what? I want to meditate every day and I want to become a new person. Okay. So tiny habits really, really helped me. So this is about 7-8 years back. I was supposed to submit my manuscript to the publisher. Okay. And I hate writing. I love the interviewing part of the book because I did research. I interviewed 150 people. All of that happened. But when it was putting it all together, it was not my fun time. So anyway, but there was a deadline, constraints work, right? But tiny habits helped me. Okay. So I had a habit of having my chai. I had just got into specialty tea before I got into coffee. So in the morning, I would have that tea. So I realized that it's an anchored habit already. So what tiny habit says is, don't do 20 minutes of meditation because that's too much and you'll do it once and then you will never do it after that. Do 1 minute of meditation. So in my case, my tiny habit was I will just write one paragraph after or during my tea. That's it. And my rule was I will stop after that paragraph. Okay. So A, you anchor it to an existing habit. B, it has to be a no-brainer activity. In the sense, time-wise. Okay. So I wrote a para and I would stop. You know what happened? In 2 weeks, my manuscript was ready. And after I submitted it, I had withdrawal symptoms. Because when I had tea, I said, oh my God, I need to write something. Because the habit was ingrained. So to answer the question of how do you make change happen, change need not happen at this massive battle or a war front. It could be that one step, that one action, which you just put into your schedule. And that itself, trust me, is the first step towards change.
So I'll take the last question, Abhijit. We have a few questions coming up. The last one about the 1% was asked by Farooq Haq. So here's one more question. So how can we master our senses? I think that's based on what you were just saying earlier.
Yeah. So I'll use a quantum physics analogy here. Anything you put attention to becomes pronounced. As simple as that. So if I give attention to my sight, and if I start saying, okay, how do I see things, different sceneries, etc. What you're doing is you're activating your sights. Okay. Same thing with sounds. Can I hear sound which I haven't heard before? What you're doing is you're actually training the brain to get things it's not been doing before. Flavor, same thing. I did that in my coffee journey. I promised somebody I will not talk about coffee, but essentially people get flavors. And if I train my taste buds, okay, there was flavor 1. Can I get more flavors? So essentially that is how to activate your senses. So again, it's action and no divine kind of intervention. You have to take that action. You have to take that step, but do it consciously. And it will kind of it'll definitely kind of help you. Yeah. So that was the last question, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So Abhijit, with that we come to the basic formal round of the chat, and so we have 3 sections in this chat, and here's the last one. So the first one was when we had our talk, then the questions that were asked by the viewers, and here we call this the third round, the little discoveries round, where we get to know you, Abhijit, as a person by asking a few rapid fire questions.
So this is the part, is it?
Interesting one. So you can give rules. You can give a 1-word or a 1-sentence answer, but you can't say I don't know. Okay. So whatever. So here's the first one. All right. your wife, Sarita, she's been on this show before, Abhijit, and she was there, I think, last year. She's the perfect example of a person who has created her own future. Okay. From being in marketing, brands, advertising, to transforming herself into an award-winning chef who was trained under the world-renowned Michelin star chef Nandu Jubani in Spain. And now she runs the iconic Love Foods restaurant in Bandra. What role did you play in creating her future?
Should ask her. Well, the honest answer is I pushed her to believe, because she was, in her home as in a mother's place, just doing innovation. I said, I think it's time that you have your own restaurant. That's it.
Show up.
Yeah.
So you would have said, show up. The first step. Take the first bold step.
Take that step. You don't know how it would work out, but take it, because you're showing promise, you're showing passion, you're showing effort. Then now maybe that's the next natural progressive step, and that's essentially whatever. So
Absolutely.
I think she would agree.
We will check with her. The second one, you are a marathon runner. You have run many marathons across the world. In fact, you've participated in the Ironman in South Africa. That
was Comrades.
Oh, Comrades. Correct. And it's also considered one of the toughest races in the world. The Comrades as well, right? What is your advice to the person who's preparing for her first marathon?
Oh boy. Besides showing up.
Okay, so maybe showing up.
Okay, no, here's my honest retrospective learning. Don't get carried away by Instagram successes.
Okay.
So there is this unfortunate world of, oh, look, I ran a marathon under 4 hours. Oh, I did this, I did that. It's an unfortunate pressure point that starts building up with a lot of new runners. And that, it creates this unnecessary and very unhealthy reason to, oh my God, I need to do that. I need to now go from a half marathon to a full to an ultra. And I was victim to that, to be very honest. I would have...
You ran the ultra as well?
I attempted the ultra, but I attempted it with an injury, which
and where was this? In India, or was it where you kind of...
That was Comrades.
That was Comrades, okay. So, that's over what? 3-4 days, right?
No. It's a regular marathon is 42K.
Correct.
This was 89K.
And generally people complete in how many hours? The Comrades?
So, no, you're supposed to. As a constraints thing, you are supposed to finish it in 12.
Okay.
Okay, so the point is, people should ideally naturally progress towards that. 42 to 89 is not a joke.
Of course.
So, jump from, I qualified for Comrades, so I went for it. Yeah. So my advice to any runner is to know your sweet spot of what you enjoy and what is out of your comfort zone. Don't go beyond that just to prove a point. That would be my advice. Because today, the price I paid, I got a knee injury, training for Comrades, because it's all a hill kind of run, and downhill running is not the easiest of things. So I went in with the injury, which is why I could complete only half of it. And I couldn't run properly after that, and I just could do a little bit of running here and there. But then I also said, hey, maybe I forgot why I was running in the first place, because I love running to music. And somewhere down this line that, hey, let me try out a half marathon, then the next one and the next one. So I think that vicious cycle of pushing yourself, which is not driven from your own why, or your true reason why you're doing it, can be the trap. And this is not just for running, but it can be for anything. Yeah, it could be for any profession. Why do you want to be that? Why do you want to be a chef? Why do you, it's an important thing to, so that getting that why, your why, is very critical for any activity or any journey.
So this is a health question. So I know we've had this discussion many times in the past that you've been plagued by gout, and even I had the same situation, and we have discussed this. But now you lead an immensely healthy lifestyle. So what is your advice for healthy living?
Wow. Okay, firstly, I think it needs to be holistic. It cannot be remember silos. It can't be at only body or only mind. It needs to be holistic. it needs to follow that principle of, not easy to do, which is what works for you. Okay. And this is again another trap that most people fall into. Oh, the trend is to go keto. So everybody goes keto. But does that truly work for you? And again, the why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? So for example, I got into running not for health. I got into running because I had turned around my health. And for the first time, I realized I could do things I could never do in my life before. Like earlier, I used to smoke, I used to drink. I would not be able to run for more than 30 seconds on a treadmill without huffing and puffing. So just the fact that I could was a massive, high point. But then I forgot my why. And then I got a little carried away. Oh, everybody's going for marathons. Oh, let me go for that. And I think it's very important to stay anchored to your why, even if your why keeps changing, because your why might change. In fact, it does. So coming back to health, health ultimately is like, with different strokes for different folks. You have to know. So it's like people will say, these absolutes is the worst thing in health. Carbs is bad. Fat is good. Is it good for you? Now the question and the answer is, how do you know? There are tests. There's testing it out. Like for example, I was paleo 9 years ago. Okay. And I realized it wasn't necessarily doing good for me. So in fact, during my running journey, which was that time, I used to have energy crashes beyond, let's say, when I used to touch 30 kilometers ahead of 30K. How do you kind of, keep the energy going, right? So then it would be energy gels and there would be crashes. So I was like, this is not working. And paleo, which was at that time the fad thing worldwide, not in India, was what I tried. And I realized that maybe, and because of gout and all of that, I realized that maybe it wasn't best for me because there was a little bit of too much of emphasis on protein.
Sure.
So then I pivoted to keto 5 years ago, only because the protein component came way, way less and the fat took over the satiety factor. And that was my reason for keto. But unfortunately, what I'm seeing in the last 2-3 years is, boom, X people are doing keto, so are we. So, the future is not something which should be the fad. The future is something that it's the future that you want to create for yourself. And you need to, have your why for it and work towards it, So this, the why, I keep coming back to this. So in my workshop, there were 3 people who had the same goal, each one wanted to lose, let's say, X kilos of weight. But, when you applied the filter of why, you found out from person number 1 that the true motivation was maybe attracting the right person in that person's life. Second one was confidence at work. The third one was turning health around. So if you look at it, the goal was not 10 kilos of weight loss. It was actually attracting the right person in my life, confidence at work, and turning health around. So unfortunately, we chase goals, not knowing why we're chasing goals. So
the why is very important. The purpose.
It's a filter. It's a filter. And if you keep, it keeps you true. It's something that if you keep asking, because I remember after the famous ones, I did Chicago was my first one, New York, which is like one of the most, celebrated marathons. And I loved that one. And when I did Mumbai after that, I had a question. Why am I doing this? And I didn't like the answer. Like, I'm just doing it because it's the thing to be done. And I didn't have an answer for that race. And I got injured in that race. I finished it. But the point is, I wasn't truly excited by that particular race because I didn't have the right why for it. The next one I did Orwell, the Pondicherry one, which was all in the forest. So this was a very different why, saying I've never run in a forest. Wow. And it was in darkness, So there was a very different high, if you want to call it. So the why was very, 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 very solid on that front. So anyway, so that would be my honest, because trust me, anybody who gives you, these are the 3 things for health, I would get a little suspicious.
What is your success mantra?
Oops. It is actually that thing which I spoke about earlier, which is knowing what makes you tick. Okay. Applying it to the via the why, what you want to create, and having a process and a framework to keep getting there. So that it's not a one-off. So to me, that is the only success mantra. And like I said, it is different strokes for different folks. So it has to be applied for you. And that would be my
success mantra.
Yeah.
Abhijit, what is the lesson that you have learned from your biggest failure?
Which I just said, when I do something without realizing the why, and if I have done something for the sake of doing it, it has never gone right for me. So it's when I'm not true to my superstar code, that's my lesson. So when I'm true to it, not only is it there's a far better outcome, but I also enjoy the process. So for me, enjoying the process is very crucial. So I can't do something because there is a goal to be met, and that's always been my lesson. So if there is a failure, I would then introspect and figure out what is it that kind of, like for example, the book versus book workshop. I realized that I got into the book for the wrong reason. Because somebody said do a book, because there was a publisher out there with a contract. And then when I started testing out the workshop, and the reason why I didn't go into the book was people in the workshop told me that, Abhijit, we are seeing these data points in our lives every day, but we are not connecting it the way you are connecting it for us. And then I started asking myself a question, then what will my book do? Because I will just be giving you a framework. I will just be giving you a set of questions, and I will be just adding to the list of 1,000 self-help books
out there.
Confusion. So I didn't want to be part of that. At that time, this was 2013, 2012, whatever, I felt technology could play a role. Today, sitting on 2021, the way AI has progressed, the way it's become intelligent, so I think it needed technology to play that intuitive factor. Today, a recommendation engine on Amazon or for whatever, Google or Facebook knows you better than you.
True.
Because it connects data points. My Spotify experience for the last 10 years. I mean, it's my biggest joy. I still have it besides my high-res services, but only because of discovery. Because it somehow always keeps blowing my mind. With the music, it kind of recommends every day. So that to me was missing probably in my, journey that
time. You're a coach who influences so many lives, right? Whether it's individuals or organizations. But who has influenced you the most in personal interactions?
Everything influences. So when you say who is this, like,
is there one person who kind of is your mentor? Or are there many people out there who have shaped
I think
journey?
different contexts would have different mentors. I mentioned Steve Jobs, and see, there is a part of Steve Jobs which maybe I may not be empathetic towards. The way he treated people and all that is a separate part of Steve Jobs. But the way he changed the game, the way he changed the rules of technology is immensely inspiring for me, and more importantly, my relationship with technology personally. So when he passed away exactly 10 years ago, I was there in the US at that time, and I heard the news, and the next day I was flying to the Chicago Marathon, whatever, and the newspapers were just full of his demise. I cried that entire day, because he had literally impacted. But it's that part. So I always believe that it's not the whole person, but what about that person impacts you. So this thing that, and this is probably that there are certain things of a person, those dimensions which probably are inspiring, but that does not mean the whole person then should just get idolized. So that's the lesson I have learned. So what of Steve Jobs, what of Mark Zuckerberg, etc., etc. Just saying. Because, everybody has something to bring to the table. So,
So I'll come to the last question here. And I have to end this session with coffee. Okay. So, so Abhijit, no discussion with you is ever complete without discussing coffee. So you're a coffee connoisseur. I don't know if I can call you a barista or not, whether that definition suits you, but you're a coffee connoisseur, if I can put it this way.
Or home barista, better. Yeah.
Maybe a home barista. How many different types of coffee do you currently have at home right now?
Honestly, not too many.
Okay.
So I've been exploring it for 8 years. So I also, by the way, have a caffeine tolerance limit.
Okay.
Okay. So I can only have 1 or max 2 cups a day.
So you did some tests to figure that out? Or?
No. I can't handle caffeine.
Okay.
So even when I travel and I go to the most exciting places and I go to coffee shops, that's it. It's those 2 cups. Okay. So everything is structured around, okay, I can have 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, and that's it. Okay. So it's quality for me. And if you were to ask me, the other part of it is freshness. So I get fresh roasted beans, whatever.
So are you still getting coffee from around the world?
Yes. So at any given point, I would have probably 2 coffees. That's it. So there is another coffee, which different purpose, different why, which is part of the keto regime I follow. There is something called a bulletproof coffee that I have. That is not this coffee home barista kind of thing. That is purely as a alternate to breakfast, which suits me very well. It's a nice kind of lift me up in the day. That's how I start my day. So I have the bulletproof coffee. So that's 1 coffee. And honestly, my second coffee is that I try and do that brew, which by the way is like a 1-hour ritual. So it's like my meditation. It is my exploration journey. I measure it. I have a sheet which gets into what part of the flavor, aroma, body, after finish did I get in that cup. And I keep measuring it day to day, for that same coffee. So that I hope
you're really very passionate about coffee. You're not a guy who will just smell the aroma or take in the aroma and just drink it and say, oh, that was a nice cup of coffee. You actually kind of get deep into that coffee.
My parts of my superstar code is I like to put objectivity to my subjectivity. So, which means I like to have a process and structure which kind of helps me tangibilize and truly appreciate that experience and help me have a benchmark of it rather than it just being hey, it was nice. So it's not just coffee, but anything that I do in life.
Absolutely.
Should ideally have that ability to, get into in some way.
So before we end the chat, Abhijit, I wanted to share a very heartfelt message from Sarita. She is written on the channel. Yes, he played the biggest role to nudge me. And he asked me my why every day till I found my why.
She hates that word.
But she didn't mention it. It's there. So with that, I think, Abhijit, we come to the end of this chat. It's really been an honor talking to you today. We've had many discussions, but today was a more structured discussion. So thank you for being here on our chat show, and we wish you good health, many, many, many more rounds of coffee, and hope to see you soon someday.
Thank you for inviting me. And thanks to the entire team. It was truly a pleasure connecting with them. Yeah. Thanks so much, Abhik.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abhijit.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we were talking to Abhijit Pradhan, business innovation coach, visioning coach, futurist coach, marathoner, coffee connoisseur. Thank you for watching today's session brought to you by OWL. Stay tuned for more such meaningful sessions from outdoor wilderness and learning. Until the next episode, stay healthy, stay safe. This is your host, Abhik Datta, wishing you goodbye.